Hello and welcome to the Middle School Bookmarker Show. My name is Chris.
And I'm Joellen. We are teachers reading the middle school novel Seedfolks by Paul Fleischman.
And today we're covering chapters 9 and 10. That is the characters Curtis and Nora. If you haven't read those chapters yet, go do that now and then come back and listen to our conversations about them.
And by the way, we're going to get this whole show wrapped up in just 11 minutes because 11 minutes is all you need to
grow beefsteak tomatoes instead of beefy biceps to get your girlfriend back. And Curtis is the one doing that. We meet Curtis, also nicknamed Atlas, also nicknamed Seps, short for biceps. We find out that Curtis lives a couple doors down from a gym, and man, that guy works out a lot. He starts off with that line talking about how he's got biceps, and he says, "Quad's now playing on a body near you." I like that line. Curtis seems pretty full of himself at the beginning of this chapter for sure.
Absolutely. Just a little bit, right. And Letitia, who is his ex-girlfriend that he's trying to get back with that body of steel, she's a little bit older than Curtis. She wants to settle down, of course, maybe have some children. But, with that those quads and that attitude, Curtis secretly has been dating other girls. And Letitia dumped him.
Terrible Curtis. Mistake. But that was 5 years ago. We actually pick up with Curtis coming back to Cleveland from Cincinnati. He has never been able to get this girl out of his brain. He's been thinking about Letitia, and when he moves back, he decides he wants to seriously date Letitia, if not maybe even marry her. But he's tried talking to her a couple times, and she's not giving him the time of day.
Nope, slamming the door right in his face. But he's thinking about stuff, and he remembers that Letitia loves tomatoes. He remembers her slicing just a big hunk of tomato on a plain sandwich, and she eats them like apples. And he thinks, okay, I can maybe plant some tomatoes right near the edge of the garden to get her attention, maybe win her back.
And I think that's a great move. If you messed up, talk is cheap. You can't just say sorry. You got to try to make up for it. But Curtis has never planted anything before. There wasn't an opportunity for him to do it probably before. So there's going to be some bumps in the road. Good thing is, as soon as he gets started, Tio Juan shows up and he helps him out, teaches him how to string up the plants. Curtis says that he felt really excited watching the plants grow. It becomes like a show that he watches every day. And I'm sure you felt the same thing with gardening. I certainly have. It actually is a lot of fun going out every single day and seeing the new bugs on there, seeing the new little bits of growth, reading if you need to, or like looking at the plant and seeing if you need to give it more water. I have felt the same thing that Curtis has felt about going out every single day and seeing the small changes.
Absolutely. And small changes are what make that garden grow. And then, to see the fruit, or like you said, if you see a bug on there, how am I going to get rid of this bug? And what do I add? Do I add more fertilizer, less fertilizer? It is just, it's a good mind exercise too. Not only getting dirty, but also thinking about that garden as if it were your small little children you're caring for. And Curtis feels the same way. He goes out every day. He's checking for bugs. He's adding fertilizers. Guess what? He stopped working out at the gym. He stopped talking to other girls, and he even lost the nickname Seps. Now, people are going to call him Tomato, but he is totally enamored with this garden.
I think under normal conditions, he probably wouldn't be cool with losing Atlas, losing Seps, and gaining Tomato, but he's trying to impress Letitia. Yeah. And things are going well for him throughout the chapter. The tomatoes are transforming from those little green guys into the red ones, but Curtis notices that somebody is stealing his tomatoes. He's very upset by this, but he realizes that because of the way the garden's set up and because he is busy, he can't watch these tomatoes all day and night. Fortunately, he problem solves and he develops a little bit of a symbiotic relationship with another character. I think the character's name was Roy. And he finds Roy because Royce, not Roy.
Right.
And they find Royce. They suspect that Royce actually might even be sleeping in the garden. Royce has a terrible background. It seems like he's 15. His father abused him and beat him up and kicked him out, which is absolutely horrible. But they're making the most out of the situation. Curtis has a problem. He takes Royce out for breakfast. He decides that he's going to try to help out Royce and maybe get some benefits out of it as well.
Another relationship building in that garden. It's way more than growing things for sure. But he kind of gets him a sleeping bag. He gives him some food money. He gives him a pitchfork to guard the garden, and he paints a sign that says Letitia's tomatoes. So Curtis and Royce are teaming up to protect that garden. Mm,
And one day, the very last line of this chapter is a hopeful one.
yeah,
He is out working on the tomatoes. This is after he set up Royce with all this stuff. He says in the window, after looking up there many, many times, after trying to talk to Letitia many, many times, or a couple times at least,
yeah.
he sees Letitia in the window, which means that maybe this is going to work. Maybe he's going to be able to prove through his actions that he is serious and he does really want to have another shot with her.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
Yes, very hopeful, very hopeful. So now we meet Nora, another character, and she's a British nurse for the elderly. And as we know, not only Americans like to get out and walk, but the Brits love to be outside, especially like nanny types, with little babies in their prams. Well, she's taking care of Mr. Miles, who is not a baby. He's a pretty elderly gentleman, and she takes him on walks on his wheelchair. Even though nobody else does, she likes this task.
And she goes on to describe that Mr. Miles, unfortunately, is a stroke victim,
Yeah.
which is kind of a stroke is kind of like having a heart attack in your brain. Blood is constantly flowing into your brain, and a stroke happens when something blocks the blood from getting to specific spots in your brain, and it can cause really bad permanent injuries or it could kill you. So, Mr. Miles has had, I think, a couple strokes, and he can't communicate normally anymore. He's elderly and he has the effects of a stroke affecting him, so he can't talk normally like everybody else can.
Right. But I don't think that deters Nora. She kind of talks to him and, as you're walking, making conversation, even though he's not as responsive as he could be. But, Mr. Miles he's really not interested in much anymore. She even mentions he might be leaving the earth soon. But she was pushing him down the street near the garden, and he lifts his hand to tell her to stop. And he sees this garden, he smells the garden, and he gets excited in a way that Nora has never seen him get excited before.
Which is incredible that just walking by the garden has this effect on this guy who probably hasn't been excited by very much. They then go on to describe the current state of the garden. This thing's been an evolving process. And they have my favorite part of how they describe it is when they describe how the one fence door is actually a car door. Some parts of the garden are well organized, some have brick paths, some don't. So it's a little bit chaotic as this thing is coming together. Nora really likes how mismatched all the materials are. I think she says something about it being like having a domestic charm, but the garden is coming along. Even though they're just reusing materials and it doesn't look uniform and clean, they are reusing the materials and they're giving it some bit of order.
Absolutely. And I think a community garden like that, and there's one in Coatesville near us that I help at, and you can see the resourcefulness of people using what they have, because there's not a lot of money to buy things to make it look like a perfect little garden, but it does become just eclectic and almost like a little art garden. And she decides, because of this feeling that Mr. Miles and she get at the garden, she wants him to do more than just watch what's going on. So each day she buys some different things: a barrel for some rain, a shovel, and seeds. Mr. Miles loves the not so much the vegetable seeds, but the flower seeds, hollyhocks and poppies and snapdragons. And Nora comments repeatedly that the smell of this garden seems to bring Mr. Miles back from where he is to where he was.
So Nora going that extra mile, taking Mr. Miles out on that walk has had a huge benefit, a huge change in him. And they start spending a lot of time in the garden. There's a point where, kind of like we were talking about earlier with Curtis going out and inspecting the garden every day, she says it's like a soap opera going out of the grounds where you go and you look every day and there's different things happening. She sees Mr. Miles become more active than he has ever been before. It's very heartwarming to read that and picture that in my mind.
It is. And I think one of the sentences was, he holds the gentle flower petals like a small child's hand, or it's just gorgeous. It's gorgeous. But of course, they're there. A lot of people are coming and going, coming and going. And boom, rain comes. And everyone who's working at the garden that afternoon has to huddle under this one protective area. Everybody starts to see everybody. There's friendships building. I love too, they talk about people pantomiming to communicate because remember, we've got lots of different languages going on there. And they're all very different, but they do share that garden, problems or not problems, right?
I remember Sam was talking about this a couple of chapters ago. He tried really hard to get people that don't normally talk to each other to talk to each other. And
Yes.
now the garden and this rainstorm has done it. It gives everybody in the community something in common to all talk about, regardless of who they are or what language they have. That doesn't usually happen. You remember probably Sam said all that. He said that it was his job to try to get these things to happen, and the garden's doing it. It's fantastic. We have come a long way from garbage fridge.
Yes, with the rats running around, we sure have. And Nora has some visitors, guests from out of town, and she takes them up to the tower observation. And she wants them to see the garden, and she kind of realizes that most people don't have any idea that this garden is there. And so they're peering down over this tower. And, in between seeing all the buildings, you can see that little piece of the Gibb Street Garden. And it's one of the most beautiful and important places in that city of Cleveland.
Fantastic. After a couple bummer chapters, things are coming together. All right, we're a smidge over time. Let's get out of here. Be sure to hit like, subscribe, the bell, whatever other stuff YouTube throws down there. Next time we are reading chapters 11 and 12. That is Mary Sela and Amir. We will see you then.
See you then.